Good morning and good afternoon, depending on where you're tuning in from. But thank you guys for joining us. My name is Zach Posner. I'm a co-founder and managing partner at the LegalTech Fund. We are thrilled to have our friend and our portfolio company, Nino, here with us today. Nino, thanks for spending a few minutes with us.
Pleasure. Always a pleasure to speak to you.
All right. So if you've seen these before, you know that we start to think about, we start these off by talking about people personally and understanding to get to know the entrepreneur a little bit. So I'm going to throw a couple questions at you that way, and then we'll get into Antidote. If you were not in legal tech, which I guess you've been now for the better part of a decade, if not, but what other industry or role do you think you'd be passionate about?
Well, my kids make fun of me because I still have some ambitions to be a professional tennis player, but bearing in mind I threw my back out tying my shoes the other day, I think that dream may have sailed. So I'll keep on trying. But in a kind of more serious note, I have learned. You're right. I've been in legal tech for a long time. I definitely learned from building my previous company. I really enjoy it. I love that early stage. I love particularly the people side, which can also be the most frustrating side. But so I would say the most closely related thing is probably a bit about what you do, right? So it's the world of the VC where you get to interact with the early stage. After I stepped down from Aperio, I started mentoring some founders. It turns out like I suddenly was like, wow, I love this, and actually I learned a whole bunch of stuff from doing this previous company, and then if you can combine the two things, which I know you do, into the world of VC, I think that's the next best thing to starting your own business.
It's pretty awesome because you basically just get to attempt to not have like the same mistakes that you made, like attempt to not have your friends make the exact same mistakes, but then it gets pretty frustrating when when those mistakes still get made. How about surprising, besides the fact you're a tennis player, give us a surprising fact or something we wouldn't be aware of.
I'm pretty open, so these are probably won't be surprising to you. Well, one, I think you'll know, Nino is not my name. People assume I'm sort of Italian or something. No, Nino was just a nickname for Nicholas. My dad was late dropping me off in kindergarten, and there were already two other Nicholases there, so I got branded Nino, and it's stuck with me ever since. Related to that, drive a Vespa everywhere over here. Again, I'm not Italian, but I do love it getting around. And then what else? Probably like my closest thing to mindfulness is the 2 or 3 times a year I get to go fishing, and fly fishing in particular. I think you actually phoned me once when I was on the side of a river over here. I'm not often able to do it, but I do love it.
I guess on that note, if you could be anywhere in the world right now, where would you be?
That's a very good question. I was actually talking about something else with my wife the other night, and so my happy place is up in Scotland. Believe it or not, I was at university there. I've got family up there. Edinburgh is amazing. St Andrews, where I studied, I absolutely love it in the Highlands. Having said that, having been here for a long time, I'm pretty. Weather is a factor, put it that way. So if I was going to go move somewhere tomorrow, I'd probably go somewhere like just on the outskirts of San Diego. I think I mentioned to you before.
That pocket in the US, that's the best part of the US.
So we kind of by accident ended up in San Diego, and we had this whole road trip, and we did the road trip, but we purposely drove back early so we could spend 3 more nights in Del Mar, because I was like, this is just the best place in the States that I'd stayed.
Those little beach towns, La Jolla, Del Mar,
the 2 places we stayed.
Just spectacular places. All right, let's jump over to Antidote. Maybe a little backstory, like you've been in and around finance, the intersection of finance and legal tech for a while. What compelled you to start this? What was the aha moment? And then maybe even blend that into a little bit about what you guys are doing now.
Yeah, perfect. So certainly like the problem around billing compliance on the law firm side was something that I'd heard directly from law firms whilst I was CEO of Aperio. Essentially the complaint was like there's a myriad of e-billing tools, outside counsel guidelines for those that don't know, which I'll refer to as OCGs. That landscape is constantly evolving, and they're going, the sort of number of companies that have them and the complexity of them is only increasing. And so actually it was one of the CFOs who's like, we need an antidote to all this stuff. And so I was like, aha, I'll remember that. So I had this, pretty compelling kind of idea around it. I wanted to make sure that we were building the painkiller, if you like, and not the vitamin. And so I did a lot of discovery work post Apereo with all kinds of different levels, from CFO to partner to head of billing, etc. And there really, is kind of where I heard it most consistently and compellingly. The CFO side was, our law firm has a leaky bucket. We realization rates are kind of mid 80s, and we're losing money on partly because of complexities around the compliance side with billing guidelines. The individual partner side was, I became a lawyer. I love the law. The least favorite thing I do is time recording, or my second least favorite thing is time recording, and my most least favorite, if you like, is reviewing time recording for OCGs. And one of them referred to it as his Saturday morning problem. He basically said, every Saturday morning he gets up at 6 a.m., fires up the laptop before the kids get up, and just reviews bills against OCGs. And so it was like, all right, there's a nice balance here of like a real world kind of ROI, dollar pain for a law firm, but also there's that emotional, I hate doing this task. It's not why I do my job. And so that was really, I was like, okay, I had this sort of evidence, and now I've gone out directly to the stakeholders and spoken to them. I was like, this is a real problem to be solved.
Can you, before you go into what you guys are doing now, can
Yeah.
you give just a little context for those that aren't as familiar with outside counsel guidelines, what they are, what they entail, the prevalence
Yeah,
of?
absolutely. So outside counsel guidelines, sort of causation correlation, but they're closely associated with and often with e-billing. And e-billing is obviously similar to what Apereo was, and there's a whole host of different tools out there that corporate counsel will use to get a handle of their external legal spend. And so with that, you'll introduce, and that's invoice approval workflow. With that, you'll introduce what I refer to as outside counsel guidelines. And one section of that is billing guidelines. And that is essentially, and that can be a couple pages long, or it can be 50 pages long, depending on the complexities and the type of company. And essentially, it's a set of rules that corporate legal department, when they're engaging with external counsel, that say, this is what we do and do not pay for. And it will be things that are pretty standard, like we don't pay for block billing, which is where you have multiple tasks in a single time entry. We don't pay for internal meetings or training sessions or research, or travel needs to be pre-approved. And you can get into that. That's like entry level, and then it can get more complicated from there. So that's kind of when OCGs and billing guidelines can be used interchangeably. The reality is OCGs encompass a bit more than that, but that's kind of broadly what it is.
So when an attorney is not spending their Saturdays reviewing these, or even when they are, and there's mistakes that are made, this just like at a best case scenario is going to end up delaying payment. And then what happens over time is somehow these things just get chipped down over time. So the worst case scenario, you're not going to get paid for any of this stuff. Is that a fair way to think about it?
Yeah, exactly right. So obviously I focused on the realization rates, but the lockup, or I think in the States it's more referred to as inventory days, but the industry average is around 140 days. So it's, from doing the work to receiving cash is closing in on 6 months of the year, which is pretty crazy. And so what happens, exactly as you say, when and I think it's a third of invoices get rejected because of through these e-billing tools in spite of trying to comply. What happens is typically people just rip out the problem, and sort of you're writing down time across the board artificially, just in an effort to try and get paid more quickly. And so that's the kind of real world dollar effect. It's like you spent the time, you did the work, but because of maybe some idiosyncrasy of the rules, or you've got a word that shouldn't be there, the whole thing, it's like it's sort of a bad apple poisons the well type thing. And so the whole time entry needs to come out. So that's the kind of knock-on effect of, and I should say on the law firm side as well, one of the things I was looking for when thinking about the next company is you got the corporate counsel that have all these different tools in place to solve this. On the law firm side, you've got people. And you got lots of people, and so you have got this like just inherently manual thing going on, and lots of different stakeholders involved, that it was just ripe for technology to come in and automate the lion's share of that, which I guess leads me into what is Antidote? Yeah. So Antidote, it's an AI powered platform that integrates into the law firm's existing time recording and practice management systems. So we're agnostic as to the underlying tools that the firms use, and we integrate seamlessly with them and sit on top of them. And I kind of think about it in three ways. So the first part is we ingest the outside counsel guidelines of individual clients of the firm, and our tool will extract all of the billing rules out of those OCGs that we referred to earlier. And then we can also combine that with historical billing data. So just because the OCGs say this is what they do and don't pay for, what actually happens in practice. And through that, you then create an individual picture kind of on a per client basis of what client A will and will not pay for. Once you've got that individual picture on a per client basis, is we automate that compliance check. So we solve for that Saturday morning problem, if you like, where we continually analyze those time entries at all stages of the billing process, and we'll proactively flag those time entries that are either poorly drafted, so it's not just about outside counsel guidelines, it can be this is just poorly drafted, or they're direct violations of the outside counsel guidelines, and they will cause the invoice to fail. So that takes you almost all of the way there. And then where the technology is caught up now is it enables us to do the final bit, which is to provide the smart suggestions. So to provide a corrected time entry, if you like, recommendation that the lawyer can then, either accept, ignore, or edit to kind of how they see fit. So you save a bunch of time, you increase your realization because you're writing off less time, and then you got a cleaner bill, so it's not going to get rejected. So you're going to get into that payment run faster.
But I mean, this is a platform. This can be significant, correct? Like this can, like that 140-day problem that you described. A lot of that's because of this type of stuff. I mean, this is almost like can be a game changer.
Yeah, 100%. And actually, like, if we step back for a second, like, what are we really trying to do? What's the bigger picture, and what are the other products that we're building in due course? Yeah. It's focused on, like, billing has historically been a point of friction between professional service firms and their clients. And law firms are, particularly, it's the world I know the best, but like billing is often, you do a great job doing the legal work, and then you kind of for maybe another fact about me, I grew up in the States, so I can use American sports analogies. You're fumbling the ball like at the goal line. You did all the legal work really well, then you delivered the invoice probably too late. So probably like way after the work was done, and therefore you don't equate the value with it. And then it's got, you've got 20 different fee earners, and you've effectively got 20 different authors in that invoice. And so on and so forth. And then you've got mistakes and it gets rejected. It just presents the law firm not in their best light, put it that way. And so thinking about ways in which you can remove friction points and make billing a point of value and a point where you can show the value that the law firm has provided and the work that the lawyers have done is kind of, is like our North Star, if you like, in how we try and think about everything that we do.
And what are the early folks saying? They happy with it?
Yeah, I think people sort of, there's a couple of things on this. So one is not a single law firm every law firm's the same, right? They're all doing this manual thing. I kept talking to law firms and thinking somebody's going to have like solved this in some way, shape, or form. No. So then the next thing is, can you actually do this? Is this possible? And it's like, yeah, absolutely. And we'd wanted to do this, as I say, about 3 years ago, but the technology wasn't there. So I think from a law firm perspective, what we're seeing is the product, there's two parts to it. One is that initial ingestion of the outside counsel guidelines. That's the initial like, oh, wow, that's pretty cool. That used to take us, several hours and involve lots of different teams just to kind of read through and have you read it? And yes, I have. No, you haven't. And have you approved it? Now that takes literally minutes. I think it's more the anecdotes we get from the individual lawyers, whether they're like, I have my, like effectively, I have my weekend back. I don't have to worry about that thing or the time recording thing. Or we've had people say, I actually did this on the train on the way to work. It took me 1 minute. And the thing I used to do before, now it's just like, I got my phone in my hand, I've improved the corrections, and I'm now time compliant, billing compliant, and I can move on with my legal life.
Yeah, your verbal description, I feel like this is one of those cases you just don't do it justice. Like, I've seen the product the product is so gorgeous, it's so simple. It can be used on a mobile device, and it's just like, here's some, it just makes suggestions for you almost like in a real-time basis. It's beautiful, for lack of a better word.
No, I appreciate it. It's the that UI, and I think traditionally legal tech is underserved. I think it's changed a lot, and you've been at the forefront of this. But exactly as you described, the product is beautiful, and we spend a long time.
Yeah.
The old expression, if I'd had more time, I'd have written a shorter letter.
Yep.
It's kind of like that. We spent a lot of time making it really simple and really beautiful, so that it's so intuitive the lawyers will engage with it. I will say though, the one other thing I'll add to that is that, and a little bit about how I think about things differently this time. One of those things is, how can we meet lawyers in their native workflows? So we've got this beautiful app, and you can engage with it, and lots of people do. But also, can I deliver 95% of the value to where a lawyer already is today? So can I deliver that same value, but in Outlook, so that they can do most of what they need to do there? Because that getting the adoption side, which I'm sure tons of legal tech companies have struggled with, that is one of the most challenging pieces that most legal tech companies face.
Yeah, no, it kind of definitely is. What so this more recent generation of technology enabled this to be, enabled you to bring the vision to life. If we fast forward to 5 years, like, is there a bigger vision? I mean, do you think that the general stack stays similar to what we're seeing now, and you get to help people navigate through that technology stack and kind of add some user experience that makes it a little bit easier? Or do you see or do you predict dramatic changes in what we see out there?
I think it will be. I think a pause and think. So from the antidote perspective, we're focusing on this pain, and it's a huge pain, and that the value of it is vast, right? So you're $1 billion law firm, and we can shift the dial by 3 to 5% on your realization rate. You're talking kind of $50 million of cash, and guess what? You had to do less work to unlock that, not more. That's
Yeah.
the kind of like no-brainer thing about what we're doing. There's the broader picture though about billing, and billing as a point of value and not a point of friction. And so the ability for the law firm to demonstrate to the client, to show the client, this is the work we've done for you, this is the work we're doing for you, here are your outside counsel guidelines, here's how we've applied them, and being transparent, and then enabling the clients to effectively, you say, yeah, I can see that, I approve it, and just reducing all the time thinking, how can I reduce that time to pay? How can I get the show the value of the work being done as closely as possible to the actual work being done, not kind of months after and creating the issues in that respect. So I think slowly kind of breaking off more of those pieces of that billing stack, and sort of, but you can't do that overnight. Sorry, you can't do that instantly. You've got to build, and you'll know this again as well, like legal tech world is very much about establishing relationships and building those relationships and creating a wedge and getting in and then going from there. And I think that's 100% what we're doing, is establishing those relationships.
That's pretty awesome, and excited to see how the product evolves over the next couple of years. What if there's people watching today or people that will be watching, I'm sure in the future, and they want to get in touch with you, how do they learn more, and how do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so if you want to see more about kind of what we're doing, it's antidotelegal.com. I think LinkedIn for me is Nicholas Dadamar, not Nino. But no, always happy. I love face-to-face. So if anyone's in London or I'm often in the States, always happy for that. But otherwise, I can also reach me at nicholas@antidotelegal.com.
And any ask for the people listening, like anything, you get to ask for something.
Brilliant. Always want to talk to law firms. Always want to. I think our view is that the legal tech has grown exponentially in recent times, but most of the focus has been on the practice of law, not necessarily the business of law. And so we're kind of championing, to a certain extent, I talked a lot about the partner experience, but actually most of the people we interact with are the billing teams, the head of billing, the head of finance, innovation as well, of course. But would love to speak to more, people in those roles that are kind of thinking, is there something out there for me, when all I read about is the next, contract generation tool or whatever it may be. Valid though they are, we think the business of law is definitely underserved, and that's our focus. So would love to speak to people on that side of the fence, and any kind of I guess tips and advice and other bits and pieces. Always happy to share war stories as well. As I mentioned, I do the kind of mentoring side of things as well for other early stage founders, which secretly I get as much value as they do, because it helps me kind of contextualize my own kind of challenges that I'm facing. So always happy to offer some advice where people would like.
Awesome. Well, I thank you for taking a few minutes with us. It's always great chatting with you. We've known each other for, I don't even know, many years, and we couldn't be more honored to
Yeah,
have you in our portfolio.
pleasure. Thank you so much,
All right.
Zach. I really
Thanks, Nino.
appreciate it.
Thanks everybody for joining.